Pregame.com.
The Colts are at the Texans on Sunday. We've got the Texans laying 9.5 as we speak, total sitting at 48. And Steve, I know you want to mention a couple of things about that line in just a moment, but the Texans were virtually a no-show against New England on Monday night. Now, this is the second time that they've stepped up in a marquee situation against a big-name team, Green Bay being the other time, and they have not performed well at all from the opening kick till the final gun against either one of those teams, getting trashed by both. Not just Schaub playing poorly or the offense not scoring the way they should moving the football, but that defense against Andrew Luck. I mean, not against Andrew Luck. That's this week. Against Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers, and, of course, against New England on Monday night against Tom Brady. Something like 45 for 72, those two quarterbacks combined, over 600 yards, 10 touchdown passes, no interceptions, no pass rush, even from J.J. Watt.
Yeah, when it's primetime cameras come on, Houston goes home. So they certainly looked atrocious in those two games. Looked pretty good in the other 11 games when they're not playing against the primetime competition. And sometimes you wonder, you're watching the game, and it wouldn't have mattered. This was all New England, but you're seeing flags. Well, they're throwing the ball 10 yards over Welker, and the yellow canaries are flying. It's like, who does the NFL want to have a number 1 or number 2 seed and go to the Super Bowl? But I do think that was a terrible spot. We talked about that before. I was against them in that game.
Sure.
Third straight road game. They'd had some defensive injuries. Cushing was out, and they'd gotten lucky. They really had in their some overtime wins. It was a spot where you could say they didn't need the game. They wanted the game. They wanted to step up. But it was almost like playing with house money. We'd like to win this one. Now, all of a sudden, it's gut check time. What is going on? They went from being a lock to be the number 1 seed to, oh, my gosh, if they lose this game to the Colts, they have to go to Indianapolis week 17, which they could lose that game, and now they're staring at wild card. They could lose the division. The Colts could win. I can't believe I'm saying this. The Colts could win this division.
And it's amazing that they could be in this position when you consider Andrew Luck's, passer rating. But here's a good one. Chris Andrews mentioned this on Monday Night First Preview Radio. He broke down the QBR that you'll find like at ESPN, and then the passer rating that the NFL likes to talk about. Two different things. It's kind of like, I was telling Chris on the show, it's kind of like measuring ERA against WHIP. At one time, ERA is what everybody looked at 30, 40 years ago. Metrics come into it, and all the sabermetrics come into it, and all of a sudden we find out that WHIP means so much more. QBR, he's strong, Andrew Luck, no matter where he's playing, and it has to deal with how they're playing under certain circumstances, how they do in the fourth quarter, things of that nature, where passer rating just doesn't mean as much as we thought it did, so to speak. But Andrew Luck still is not the same quarterback on the road as he is at home. Does Houston bounce back here? I know you passed on Monday night, but can they bounce back with those cluster injuries at linebacker, Cushing, as Steve mentioned, for several weeks now, and at corner?
I think they can. I mean, like Steve said, this is the season for Houston because it unravels if they lose here. And, 3 games in a row on the road, that's tough for any NFL team, and 4 of the last 5. But I'm looking at the Indianapolis Colts. They are not the same team on the road as they are at home. You look at, they gave up 41 to Chicago on the road, 35 to the Jets. The Jets, that's like a month's worth of score.
Sure, a preseason game?
Yeah. 59 to New England and 33 to Detroit. Houston's offense can score. And I think what's going to end up happening is Houston's going to be able to get a lead early, and then the defense, which, we know they've got injuries, but whenever you've got a big lead and Indianapolis has to become one-dimensional, then you can pin your ears a little bit, and I think that'll be the neutralizer. And I think Houston, in this spot, this is a good spot for them.
I think you and I both had New England. You had New England last week.
I did.
We talked about it on the shows, and I'm watching that game, and I'm also at the same time, again, we're going to talk about it in just a little bit. I'm watching that New England line for this week against San Francisco inch up with every 10 yards they gained, it seemed like, in the game on Monday night. But when I'm looking at that contest, by the way, I was very happy with the Wes Welker interference call against Houston, as you were too. But, it's one of those things where sometimes you just have to admit when you look at the game and you're watching it that you got to be something going on once in a while when it comes to the way the officials call the games. I mean, 2 horrible calls against Houston. However, Steve, and I know this is your free pick, we're going to get to it in just a minute. I don't care who was on the field that night. They weren't going to beat the New England Patriots, even if the calls went the right way and were made, without that bump on Wes Welker. We've talked about it on the radio shows. There ought to be a 10-yard pass interference, and there ought to be a spot it where the foul happens interference. And that one, if you're going to call it when it's over the head, you get bumped. bumped. You can't be 100% sure that he could have caught up to it or not if he wasn't bumped. That ought to be the 10-yard variety. That should not be mark the ball 40 yards downfield.
And a lot of the referees know this, and even though it's blatant pass interference, the quarterback is let go of it a half a second before, they call holding because they know it's such a stupid rule. I don't care what the NFL rule book says. I'm only going to march off 5 yards. Really, I think it should be, I'm going to call for the NFL to make a change here. If there's intentional pass interference, spot of the foul, absolutely. Otherwise, it should be 15 yards, the college rule. It's so clear. And if that was the rule currently, and we were trying to change it to the spot of the foul, they'd be like, you're crazy. That's the dumbest rule ever.
Yeah, well, this one's your free pick.
This is my free pick. I actually think the line is anywhere from 7.5 to 9.5 in this game. There's teaser protection lines out there. The books do not want people to be able to tease Houston down to underneath -3 because they know Houston's going to kill this team. My pick is on Houston minus the 9.5. That's fine. I think that Indianapolis is a complete fraud on the road, and they're going to get exposed here. And remember, I told everyone, Indianapolis is terrible. And they're like, how can you say that? And I come back and say, I'm the guy who told you to play them over 5 wins. So now they've become overvalued.
That's Steve Fezzik. He says lay the points with Houston. I happen to agree. The Colts are an overvalued football team right now. When we come back, we got the Packers and the Bears. It's a free pick from Marco. Stick around for more at pregame.tv.